Hey, Chris here from The Chris Stefanik Show, where we talk about how to live out God's plan for you each and every day in your everyday life in a way that makes you more alive and more joyful. Check it out. So a lot of people look at this and they sense the inherent unfairness of it, or they sense that they feel disenfranchised.
Right.
And then there's a growing leftist movement because they think this is unfair. The solution, therefore, the starting point for Marxists and for distributists is the same starting point. It's a recognition of an unfairness.
Of inequality, yeah.
Right, and they go to this leftist extremism, which sadly ends up with the state owning everything instead of corporations. It's the same problem. No people own anything.
Well, some people do, right?
Yeah, just a couple people do.
Bureaucrats do. Right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I was really excited reading your book is like, oh, this is the normal, everyday guy. I wouldn't even say conservative. This is like most people would see the solution and think, well, I don't want to go unchecked capitalism, and I don't want to go Marxist because half of the ancestors of people living in America right now escaped Eastern Europe. My own family, half Slovak.
Yeah. There's only one
you got
antidote.
a solution it rejects both extremes.
There's only one antidote to socialism, and it's ownership. I say it all the time. The antidote to socialism is ownership, and we need more of it, and it needs to be pushed down and spread around. And that's what my policy proposals are all predicated on. And it's really, as you say, it's distributism, but it's distributism thought through by an economist in a way that results in a set of policies that are politically feasible and attractive. At least I hope so.
I want to ask you more about how that comes about and becomes a reality. A question just came in. How do you prevent greed within ownership? There's obviously the balance, right?
Sure, of course.
How do you prevent greed?
Yeah, look, I don't think there is a way to prevent greed, right? Greed is part of human nature. It's a vice. But I would argue that property ownership certainly does both. But that's what God gave us when He gave us our freedom, right? He said, "Look, I'm going to give you this freedom. You can use it for virtue, or you can use it for vice. Ownership is the same, right? So, without a doubt, as with all good things, they can be abused, and it's not for government, it's not for policy to prevent that. But I would say Richard Weaver is right that smallholders tend not to be greedy. The middle class wasn't a greedy class. The middle class was a flourishing, prospering middle class, right? People who own homes are happy. They're happy going out and working in their yard, taking care of their lawns, right? So it's not as if we can prevent it, but I think we should recognize that for the most part, ownership of property engenders virtue more so than it does vice. Non-ownership, I would argue, is what engenders greed, because it engenders, a kind of jealousy or a kind of envy. Right? So,
and also a natural desire to have some sort of security.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think of, I know that I have friends in Hawaii who would disagree with me having a problem with what's happening in Lanai, for instance. But because the people there, they have more money because there's a resort there now.
Yeah.
But they're not as happy.
Yeah, I suspect that's right.
Right? I'd rather have half the amount of stuff and have some control over my own destiny.
Yeah.
But when I think of an example that extreme, or where I think a lot of us are heading now, where people I didn't elect suddenly have control over what I say on social media. And, it's like, wow, I didn't know that these people were in charge of my life. There's corporations that are bigger than different countries who are operating in my life and influencing policy in different states. And they could push buttons without anyone voting. How do you overturn this without a Marxist proletariat revolt? Without violence, how do you overturn these kind of things? And I'm guessing it's the long road, over time. But what are some practical things you're pushing for?
So, I look for traditional pathways into the middle class that have been increasingly closed off over time. So, I'll give you a few examples. Let's take small business, right?
Yeah.
So, we talked about this state corporate model earlier. The Code of Federal Regulations today stands at 200,000 pages and counting. Most people don't realize this, but the vast majority of that 200,000 pages was either lobbied for or actually written by large corporations. Why? because the cost of regulatory compliance is a fixed cost. So GE or Walmart or whomever, and I'm not pointing directly at them, but large corporations can take regulatory compliance costs and spread them out over billions of dollars of revenue. But what are they doing, really? Why are they for these regulations? Because they're buying market share, right? It's a way for them to protect their markets from the little guy. So I say, look, let's have small rules for small business. Let's have a separate regulatory framework for small business written on whatever, 500 pages, 300 pages or less, so that a person, a man or woman who wants to start a business in their garage can understand the federal regulations that apply to them in an evening, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, that would have the side effect of decreasing the rate of growth of regulation, because if large corporations had to eat their own cooking and they didn't get the incumbency benefit, they'd do a lot less of it, right? They'd write a lot less reg, right? So that's one. Another is ESOPs.
I literally took a deep breath as you said that, by the way. I think, could you imagine that? I mean, I have a small business. I have a small nonprofit. I have a small for-profit. And it's like I have a constant sense that I'm breaking some rule.
Totally.
Like,
you are. You are.
I'm sure I am.
None of us knows. None of us can. There's no human mind can possibly comprehend the laws that apply to them in modern America.
It's amazing.
It's not possible. Yeah, it's not possible. You think about Aquinas, right? He says one of the conditions for law to be law is that it must be promulgated, right? Promulgated means announced and understood. Like, that's not true of the 200,000 pages of the Code of Federal Regulations. Anyway, another example is I think any transaction by which a business owner sells his or her business to their employees should be tax-free. So ESOPs, employee stock option plans, are an example of that. Why? Because most business owners do what I did. They'll sell their business to a private equity buyer or a strategic buyer because you can get a higher multiple, you can get a higher price for your business. If we made transactions, sales to employees tax-free, it would level the playing field. And we would transform employer-employee relationships, first of all. We would make employees owners. And again, that's the antidote to socialism, is ownership. It's the only antidote to socialism, is more ownership. So
it's the antidote to both extremes.
Yeah. I also think monetary policy. I talk in my manuscript about the way in which monetary policy, by driving interest rates down to 5,000-year lows, and look, there are demographic reasons for this as well, but by driving interest rates down to 5,000-year lows, we eliminate thrift, right? So compound interest is an unbelievably powerful thing, right? Saving and growing that savings over the course of a lifetime is unbelievably powerful. But you can't get that benefit at interest rates that are, 2, 3, 4%. You don't, right? And so we need to have monetary policy that recognizes the importance of thrift, of savings, allowing, a smallholder to put some money away every year and gain the benefit of that compound interest because of how powerful.
Dude, wasn't that amazing? I don't want you to miss this great stuff. Go over to the subscribe button and bring all your friends. Have a praise and worship session around that subscribe button. Light a fire near it. Toast marshmallows and offer a marshmallow to the subscribe button. Whatever you have to do, you can even just click subscribe. And you'll never miss this great content again. Share it with everybody you know. We'll see you in the next video.